Welcome back to the Metro on 101.9 WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Getting around Detroit on foot or bike can be downright scary. In the city or the suburbs, crossing the street can feel like you're trapped in the video game Frogger. Tia, explain what that game is.
Millennial sounding off. Frogger is a video game that we used to play where you would be a frog and you would be trying to get across a busy highway. Different levels, of course. Sometimes they're going really fast. Sometimes they're going slow. Either way, you're trying to jump across these lanes as a frog, and you're trying not to get hit by a car, and sometimes you get squashed.
Okay, all right, I get it. Yes, I do feel like I am trapped in Frogger sometimes. Our infrastructure in Metro Detroit prioritizes cars, not walkability. And the main roads like Woodward, Michigan Ave, Jefferson, Gratiot, Telegraph, Ford are 3 or 4 lanes wide in some places. They're so wide, you often have to cross twice. First, you make your journey to get to the median, and then you have another journey to finish crossing to the other side. So you combine that with distracted driving and larger vehicles that make pedestrian visibility even harder. And you've got a dangerous environment for people who get around the city on foot or on bike. And if you're a person with a disability or low mobility, the situation is even worse.
Robin, Detroit ranks number 3 for pedestrian fatalities nationwide. But we should note that Detroit isn't alone. It's getting more dangerous to be a pedestrian or cyclist just about anywhere you look in the U.S. Pedestrian deaths specifically are up 68% in the last decade nationwide. About 30% of Detroiters, they don't own a car. So the question of how to stay safe navigating the city's roads and sidewalks is serious. And in this hour, we want to ask you, are you afraid of getting in an accident when walking or biking around Detroit? What do you do to stay safe? Maybe you have an orange vest or an orange hat. Maybe you have a flashing light at night. Regardless of what it is, let us know. It's 313-577-1019. Now, we want to start the conversation by discussing our own experiences navigating Detroit's streets, and we've got Metro producer Sam Corey here, who worked on this assignment. Hey, Sam.
Hey, great.
I was just thinking to myself, honestly, I'm so sorry. I was thinking to myself, knees to chest. That's all I was thinking was knees to chest. That's one of the first experiences Sam and I had together walking the streets of Detroit. We went somewhere. I can't remember where we were going. And Sam just proceeds to walk across the street as if it was just a la-di-da. And I thought to myself, Sam, what are you doing?
Tia, you were literally putting your knees to chest, racing across the road, despite there not being any cars coming.
Don't trust it.
It was an interesting experience. A great way to get to know you too. But I have been biking a little bit more around the city.
Yeah.
Last summer I took my bike from my house to work a couple times, which is it's about a 8 to 10 mile ride or so.
Yeah.
And while there have been some close calls, if you take the more narrow-laned roads, it's not so bad. It's actually kind of quiet. So it's been a decent experience all around.
And have you had close calls, though?
I had one where I was in a lane, I was on the road, and there was a guy behind me who's just honking, like, get off the road. This is not for you. And I was like, it is.
It is for me,
It is for
sir.
me, too. It is for me, too. But we don't have a fully developed bike culture here in Detroit. So.
No, not yet. And Robin, what about you? I do realize you're a big walker. You lived in Denver and you had a rule about walking. What was that rule?
My rule was anywhere that I could reach via foot in under an hour, I would walk. Now, in Detroit, you're going to get yourself into some trouble trying to obey that rule. So I've really had to scale back my walking.
My face, like, I couldn't even imagine like you're going one direction in under an hour. That would be your.
Yes.
I don't know where you would end up.
In Detroit, you're saying? In some precarious places, perhaps.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, Tia, I gotta know this knees to chest thing. I gotta know what it's like for you navigating Detroit streets, and if you've had any close calls.
Yeah. Just getting around the city, just in general, just walking around. It just depends on where you're walking, where you are. Just thinking and hearing Robin talk about Ford Road and Telegraph and all those busy streets, like those are roads that I try to avoid if I'm walking in any capacity, honestly, because you have so far to get across the road. I have had so many close encounters. That's why I knees to chest it everywhere I go. I'm putting a little pep in my step every time I cross the street, even if I have to walk the right of way. It's just the culture of the city of Detroit and drivers here and kind of the lawlessness of it all. So I try my best to be a very head on the swivel type of person. And if you are listening right now and you have ways that you keep yourself safe, give us a call. It's 313-577-1019. But once again, Robin, after moving back to Detroit, are you still a big walker?
I am, but I've had my share of close calls.
Uh-oh.
Yes,
Already?
yes, absolutely.
Oh, no.
I can think back to crossing Jefferson, and I had to jump out of the way because a truck almost hit me. And then another motorist stuck her head out the window and yelled at me to pay better attention, to just rub salt into the wound. And you know, as a pedestrian, I had the right of way and I was walking in the crosswalk, but I was not going at a fast enough speed. Clearly, I was not knees to chest.
Knees to chest.
The roads are for cars. The roads are just for cars. You know?
Oh, no.
They are not.
This took me out a little bit there because the roads are, unfortunately, that's the idea. They are just meant for cars. But if you look at Michigan's law, it's truly cars, motorcycles, and bikes that are allowed. Right. So it's just like we have so much work to do to change our culture here. And, it'll be interesting to hear from our guests, and it'll be interesting to hear from some of you. So are you afraid of getting in an accident when walking or biking around Detroit? How do you stay safe? Give us a call, 313-577-1019. And we do have a caller right now. Let's go to Quentin in Detroit. Quentin, thanks for calling.
Hi, thanks for listening.
So what's up? How do you stay safe? Do you feel safe walking or biking in Detroit? And how do you stay safe when you do?
I would describe biking in Detroit as an extreme sport. Definitely get your heart rate up. Wearing a safety vest at all times. In the summer, I usually bike to work. That takes about an hour, and I'm going from like the northeast to the west side. And I think just patience is key. Sticking on sidewalks as most as possible because the bike lanes are not really well developed in all parts of the city. And definitely connecting with a good bike community and trying to find what they do. There's these kind of like biking parades that go around the city, and those are great. Just a way to raise awareness about the fact that people are out here on two wheels trying to do it. So.
Quentin, thank you so much for giving us a call. And, the perfect transition here because we do have our next guest who is going to talk a little bit about biking culture here in the city of Detroit.
Yeah, we've been talking about our experiences walking and biking around Detroit. And now we want to hear from someone who helps others explore the city in the same capacity. Jason Hall founded Slow Roll Detroit and Ride Detroit. That's an e-bike and walking tour company. Jason, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
So how did you get into biking?
Honestly, I think like most kids, they start at a very young age. I'm lucky enough to be born in the BMX freestyle era. So I came up as a kid in love with bikes. When I turned 16, I think like with most kids in Detroit, that's where I steered away from the bike is when it became less cool to girls, you know what I mean, to ride your bike. But I've always been riding bikes. But as a serious bicyclist, I think probably 2006, 2007, around that time, I worked about a mile from my apartment in downtown Detroit and had some friends who owned a bike shop, and they just thought it was absolutely ridiculous that I would go down to the basement, start my car, drive it out of the garage a mile or less, and then park it in their garage, drive it home on my lunch break, eat lunch, drive it back. I mean, literally, that was what I was doing per day, and I lived a mile away.
That probably took more time than getting on your bike or walking.
But you don't think that, again, you grow up in a place like Detroit where we're the motor city and you think, I'm supposed to be in my car. And it didn't even dawn on me at that moment. My friend said, this is crazy that you don't have a bike. And so they literally loaned me a $30 bike. And I fell in love with it just connecting with the community.
So you learned that biking actually is cool, that the girls are still going to like you when you're on your bike. What was it like to commute to work during that time in Detroit?
It's funny because at that time, there wasn't all these bike lanes and all this jazz. So, I mean, for me, honestly, it was only a mile. So it wasn't hard. Okay, let's keep it real. It became more challenging once I started to stretch my distances out because there was no infrastructure. There was no watch out. There were people riding on the other side of the street. So it was definitely a lot less safe then at the time.
So you have to be, I mean, always when you're riding a bicycle and sharing the road with motorists, you have to be vigilant, but especially during that time, I'm guessing. Your perspective of Detroit, how did that change when you started biking around the city, in addition to realizing just how vigilant you had to be sharing the road?
It was an amazing change. We grow up in a world where you're taught to really keep stuff close to the chest and be protective of things. But when you're out on a bike, you're at the whim of everything. You're at the whim of the environment, the people out there. And what for me was the most exciting thing was just connecting with people. When I was in my car, you forget how important it is somebody saying hello. But when you're on a bike, people are like, hi, and you're like, whoa, whoa. I don't even know you. And you just,
talking to me?
Right. And so my perspective really, it brought me back to the community of Detroit that I grew up in and loved. And all of a sudden I started realizing that everything I had heard in the media and grew up hearing wasn't real. It was actually good to get out and talk to people. And I think that was what made me a better person over the last couple of years, is my ability to talk to people and just deal with my environment in that essence.
Do you think that is why sometimes we think of cities where a lot of people bike as being more friendly places, because of that sense of community where we get this feeling that we're all in it together? We're not siloed in cars and separated from one another in the same way.
Absolutely. There's, when you're driving in your car, I call it your glass bubble. You've got the windows up, you're in there. But when you're in the bike lane and you're commuting and another person pulls up next to you, like you said, you're in it together. And all of a sudden, you're riding with that person. Like you don't even realize it, but you're next to them. Even if you don't talk, you're still in it together. And again, there's something to be said about we have a common goal, which is let's ride our bikes, let's be safe, let's get to where we're going on time, and and look out for each other. And I think that really does translate. I think that translates to work. Then you get to work and you're like, wow, man, like I just hung out with this person. They were awesome. You need help at your desk. I think it really does translate and bring you out of the world that you're in.
So you've been biking Detroit for nearly 20 years. How has the experience changed, would you say, in that time?
Oh, it's changed incredibly. I mean, Detroit, what they've really done with investing in the bike lanes and the infrastructure in Detroit has really made Detroit a top-tier bike-friendly city. We're number 13 out of hundreds of cities on the People for Bikes list. So we're really kicking in, and so a lot has changed. And then not only has the infrastructure changed, but again, the attitudes in people, especially when you have a bike ride like Slow Roll Detroit, where everybody's forced to deal with it, not just bicyclists. So when you have something like that, you see everybody change. And now I go around and people's attitudes about bikes are a lot different. They're used to big bike rides now, and they're just like, oh, you're the bike guy on the bike. Whereas before it was like, get out of my way. Now people embrace that type of community.
Has the infrastructure kept up, though, in terms of keeping people safe?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it might not look like it, but in different areas you'll see different types of bike lanes, and that's the evolution of how we've grown. When they first put bike lanes in, they just popped some paint on the ground. Now you've got protected bike lanes. So absolutely, we're evolving and we're growing. And again, we know people are coming to Detroit. They're coming to Detroit for tourism. They're moving to Detroit in droves. I meet influencers all the time that are coming to Detroit. And one of the reasons they're coming here is because of that type of infrastructure. They know that not only do we have cool restaurants, a great football and basketball team, but we have great community here, and you can ride your bike and enjoy yourself and be safe.
You're listening to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're speaking with Jason Hall, founder of Slow Road Detroit and Ride Detroit, which takes people around Detroit by bike. We're discussing navigating the city by foot and bike, and we do want to hear from you. Are you afraid of getting in an accident when walking or biking around the city, or do you feel safe navigating the streets of Detroit? Give us a call, 313-577-1019. We do want to get to another caller. We have Tasso here in Detroit. Tasso, are you afraid of getting in an accident when you bike or ride around the city?
Hi, thanks for having me. And yes, I do have that fear, biking or even just regular pedestrian in Detroit Metro in general. I lived in the city since 2008, got to know it intimately by doing Slow Roads with Jason. Thanks, Jason, for setting that up. But learning how to bike in the city is a challenge, and it's a lot of fear for a lot of people that are new to it. And the infrastructure has been updated, and it's getting better, but it needs a lot more work to it. As a pedestrian, it's even worse in a lot of places. A lot of roads, I know you mentioned it earlier, they're quite wide, and drivers, they look at other cars. They don't see pedestrians. They don't see bikes, and it feels very precarious a lot of times in the city and Detroit Metro in general.
Tasso, thank you so much for giving us a call today. And Jason, just speaking about that and speaking to what Tasso was just talking about a little bit, the slow road, that culture that's changing around biking and seeing more bikes on the roadways in general. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the ways that you do prepare some of the riders with you with the slow road? Just if you give them any tips or anything so they can just feel a little safer out there.
Absolutely. So one of the great things about Slow Rolls, it's a massive community. And so I can't always get the word out to a person. So what we try to really impart upon people is it's our ride, not my ride. And so we have to look out for each other. So we get a lot of new riders. And so what I say every week is raise your hand if you're a new rider. Look at the person next to you who's not. Talk to them. Learn. Ride with them. Okay, once again, that's all part of what that ride is. And then we try to do, outside of that, we try to do a lot of clinics and a lot of things that we can get people in smaller groups and really talk to them about what it means like to ride in the city and how to ride in the city of Detroit. Because, again, people, they see the bike lanes. They don't know they're supposed to go with traffic. So all of this is a discussion, and not only does that make us stronger bike riders, but it, again, makes us a stronger community if we create these situations where we can have these discussions about what's going on in our communities. So it's really just let's talk about it. Let's make videos, and then let's leave it open for questions to be asked. A lot of times we think we know all the answers, and so we go into a thing and we're like, okay, this is bike safety, and this is what you do. And somebody's sitting in the back going, well, wait a minute. So we like to open it up and say, talk to us so we can learn from your questions and hopefully help you become a stronger bike rider throughout the city. But really, to what he was talking about, I think a lot of the education needs to start at the very base level. When we go to driver's ed, when we're learning about all the other signs, we should be learning about the bike signs too. And now that we have bike lanes, the state of Michigan needs to adapt and really change their driver's ed programs to, again, educate people from the beginning. Because a lot of times people will pull up to me, including police officers, and they'll say, get up on the sidewalk. We have to start education, and we have to let people understand that the roads are for everyone.
And it's so interesting you say that, because I literally was just looking through Michigan's road laws, and that was the one thing that just stood out to me was the road is also shared with bicyclists and motorcyclists. So I just thought to myself, that's not something that I just automatically knew offhand. It was like, oh, the bike does have the right of way to be here. So just that culture in general we talked about, just being from the city, and Robin and I talk about this all the time. I talk to her about this all the time, but being from the city, we're just not used to the bike culture. We're not used to seeing bike lanes. We're not used to seeing more bikers on the roads. And we, like you said, are beholden to our vehicles and our cars if we have them. So talk a little bit about that struggle, and are we still struggling to create a strong bike culture here in the city?
I don't know if we're struggling. I think we just need more understanding that more investment needs to be made. And I know in a time like this, where funds are going away. To say we need more is kind of wild, but we really do. We need more boots on the ground. I guarantee you there's probably one or two people that work for the city that are spreading this word of bicycle advocacy. Unfortunately, there needs to be a team of people that goes out and really, again, asks the questions, meets with the Secretary of State, meets with the city of Detroit, and really builds that infrastructure in that way. I think that's the answer to this question is, we got a lot of bike advocates out there running around, but they don't really have the push behind them to get into those spaces to make change. And I think that's the important thing is instead of having people working on their own, because that's what bike advocates are doing. They're working on their own. They're trying to find grants. They're struggling. Let's fund those people to get into these schools, talk to these schools about how we can get kids on bikes, because that's the other thing. Let's stop that disconnection that happens at 16. Let's keep them riding bikes. Let's get them safe places to park their bikes. Let's get them safe routes so then we can alleviate all that other stuff. But we have to start at a very early spot in the infrastructure. We can't expect to all of a sudden go to somebody, especially, look, I'm 50. You come to me and tell me a new rule, I'm like, what? Imagine being 60 or 70 and all of a sudden you have to move your car. You don't know why. You don't understand. You really don't understand. Somebody needs to be there, like we talked about from the beginning, before that even gets there. Okay? This is what's coming, not what's here now.
And in your face, boom, this is a new change. Before we get back to the calls and back to the phones, if you are listening right now and you want to talk about road safety, biking around the city of Detroit, the number is 313-577-1019. But I do just want to go off just a little bit here because I think about biking and you talk about starting at the young age or starting at the base or that sub level there, I guess you can say. Can you talk about the importance or just the uniqueness there is of connecting to your inner kid with still riding a bike?
You can't help it. Okay, I'm just going to tell you right now, like, you're going to connect with your inner kid. There's something, I say it all the time. People get on bikes, and it's, especially when you do tours. Okay, if I do tours and 10 people come, there's probably 2 people on there that are there just because they got invited. They don't really ride bikes. The minute they start pedaling and the wind hits them, I always say you're going to hear a wee, and you literally hear that because there's something that connects you to a time in your life of adventure and freedom, and you can't stop it. So no one's going to get on a bike. I used to bet people. I would say, I'll bet you $20 that you're going to ride past me having a good time. And they would say, okay, I'll take that bet. And at the end of the tour, I would have forgotten, and they'll come up to me and give me $20. And I'm like, what's this for? And they're like, you were right. Like I had a blast. Like, and then the best is they'll be like, how can I buy a bike? How can I start doing your ride on Thursdays? Then the spark happens, and then boom, then that person's in. And once we get the buy-in, wow, I've seen people change overnight.
That's all I was thinking about is just the inner child that comes out. But we do have another caller, Susan in Birmingham. Susan, what are your thoughts about biking in the city of Detroit or even in the suburbs?
Okay, I bicycle, I walk, I have a motorcycle. And my problem is with bicyclists that just act like they're pedestrians. It's like bicyclists I think that they should, when I bicycle or on my motorcycle, I obey all the signs as if I were driving my car. And I am often driving my car, and I see bicyclists just blow through stop signs and just cut across in front of me with, it's like, do you want to be a pedestrian or do you want to be a bicyclist? And I feel like bicyclists should obey all the signs as if they were driving a car.
Thank you. Susan in Birmingham, that is a really great point. Thank you for calling the Metro. It makes me think about the proliferation of scooters as well and how people are jumping on the sidewalks to use them. And then, yes, we see the bicyclists also using sidewalks. Jason, can you speak to that and the best practices, which are not to use the sidewalks, right?
Absolutely. So we can talk first about human nature. Okay, really, what I address a lot of times is when I talk to people, I'll say, you're not supposed to be doing that. And they'll say, I'll do what I want. So first of all, we have to address human nature. Humans have a thing that they don't really following rules or being told what to do is not. We take it a different way. Like in the old days, you would take it as okay, maybe I should do it. Now it's like somebody's insulting you. And so we have to get over human nature first. I always say to people, think about the other person. Stop thinking about the I. I go fast. I want to do this. Think about the other person. Let's get over that one first. And then, again, we have to start educating everyone. We have so many gray areas. Like you said, you talked about scooters. They're a motorized vehicle. They should be on the roads just like everything else. But there's a gray area there because we grew up riding scooters. And as kids, you don't ride your scooter in the street. You rode it on the sidewalk.
And got in trouble if you rode it in the street.
Right. And so, again, that's the responsibility of a little bit of everybody. Like we can't say that this is your job, but like the scooter people need to buy in on this too. Okay, you can't just throw scooters out here. You can't just throw all this stuff out here. We have to communicate and educate. And people, again, through communication and education, you build relationships. It's not a bad thing. I love going to meetings, and people are like, "Oh, you love going to meetings? Why?" I'm like, because I'm gonna meet somebody at that meeting that's interesting, and we can build. So I think we just need to, again, educate everyone. No, you're riding, even a bicycle is not to be ridden on the sidewalk. Imagine if you were riding on the sidewalk going 15 miles an hour on a bike and somebody walked out of CVS, okay? They're not looking for you on your bike. You're not looking for them coming out of CVS. Boom, now we have an accident. If I'm on the road, that's not happening, okay? That's the safety aspect. A lot of people think it's about getting bikes off the sidewalk because they're this and that. No, it's about safety. But again, see how we're having this conversation and I can see wheels are turning because you're like, I never thought of that.
Never.
And that's what's important. We need to have these conversations where people can say, why would you think you could ride your bike on the sidewalk? Okay, and let's think about that. And so again, let's talk, conversation, community.
That might be the way to solve many problems. Conversation and community. Look at us here on the Metro solving the world's problems. We got another caller from the airport. Adriel, what's it like for you to navigate Detroit and the suburbs by bike and foot?
Hey, Adriel.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey, everybody. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Just coming back from Hawaii. I'm in LAX right now and tuned into DET. And heard my boy Jason on, so I had to chime in. Tia and everybody else too. So yeah, just biking in Detroit for me is, first of all, it's a pleasure. With our flat roads and oftentimes wide streets. That aren't necessarily as crowded as other places, but it also can be, kind of dangerous, right? And I think that, it's kind of to piggyback on what Jason was saying, it really does come down to driver education, I think equally, if not more so, than biker education. A lot of folks out here don't know that bikes have a right to be there. So, yeah. Hello?
Yes. You're right. There are a lot of folks who don't know that they need to be sharing the road. I wonder, to that end, Jason, you founded Slow Roll in 2010. What has surprised you most about the project since that time? Even if, and perhaps it's partially what Adriel was saying.
The project being Slow Roll?
Yeah. What surprised you about the project?
You got an hour? You got 2 hours?
No,
the most,
1 minute.
The most, I think what surprised me most is how important it was to people. When you're in it, I hear it. I heard it all the time. But when we took it away, I thought it would literally just go away. The next day I got 10 emails, and literally for 3 years, I was getting at least 10 emails a day or calls from people talking about when I was restarting it, how much it meant to them physically and mentally. That really blew my mind, how strong that brand was and what we had built. And so for 3 years later to have people, and then when we restarted it, to have 1,000 people show up the first day was surreal. And so for me to see again, and again, you talk to the city of Detroit. I had police officers come to me and say, when are you restarting Slow Roll? Detroit needs that money. Detroit needs that energy. And that blew my mind. Like, again, for me at that moment, I think we were just so caught up in the bike ride, and we were just so caught up in kind of going in a circle and making the routes that we didn't have time to stop and say, what have we really built, in this place? And so that for me was the most surprising thing. Was at 3 years after we stopped doing it, the people were still there and still want it and still need it, and we're still doing it.
I just want to say that when I do walk around this particular area, this Cass Corridor area, wherever you want to say, Wayne State's campus, whatever it may be, and in the summertime, especially when it's warm outside, you see the slow roll in full force rolling down Cass or 3rd, and I look forward to it. I look to see it every summer when I'm walking around, especially at night or in the evening, 6 o'clock or so. I look forward to seeing the bikes out in big groups, and every year I tell myself, I'm going to get a bike and I'm going to join slow roll. So this might be the year for us. Robin, I don't know if you have a bike already. I don't own a bike, but I think it's time for us to get bikes and hit the slow roll this summer.
We've got our reason now.
We got our reason.
Jason Hall, founder of Slow Roll Detroit and Ride Detroit, an e-bike and walking tour company. Thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Metro, and we've been discussing biking and walking in Detroit, and we do want to hear from you. Are you afraid of getting in an accident when walking or biking around the city or in Metro Detroit, or do you feel safe? How do you navigate the streets safely? Give us a call, 313-577-1019.
This is the Metro on WDET. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Pedestrian and cyclist fatalities are problems both in Detroit and around the country. Thankfully, there are a number of things that city leaders are working on to change that. Beltways and trails have become popular in places like Chicago and Atlanta to give people an alternative way to get around aside from a car. And in Detroit, city leaders are working to fund and construct the Joe Louis Greenway. That's a biking and walking trail that extends 27 and a half miles from the riverfront to McNichols.
That's right, Robin. And Mayor Duggan committed $20 million to building the first phase of the Greenway. Where is this project? Where is it now in the process? And what is the capacity to reduce pedestrian and cyclist deaths and to connect Detroiters? To discuss this, we have Leona Metley here. She is the executive director of the Joe Louis Greenway Partnership. Director Metley, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you so much, Tia and Robin. I'm so excited to be here and so appreciative of all the amazing conversations that you guys are having around this topic and others.
Oh, thank you so much. And you were one of the perfect people to talk about this with, because I remember the last time you were on the show, we talked a little bit about biking and walking around the city. And you talked a little bit about your experience just getting on a bike or getting on a motorized scooter and just kind of hitting the road. So can you talk a little bit about your experience as a biker or a walker in the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's about my childhood. Like, it was so normal to, get out, ride my bike, ride for hours. And so we had sidewalks and we had neighborhood parks. And I also think that, drivers and others were more aware of children playing. It was just so common. And then, we've gone through a number of years since I was a young girl riding a bike. And now as an adult, we see so many more cars on the road. We are the Motor City. We are the city that put the world on wheels. And so while that's such an important part of our history, it's not always like four wheels. And there's so many ways that people get around this city, and I think that's important for us to think about.
Yeah. And make the case for the Greenway. What do you think will be its biggest impact? Of course, aside from having this beautiful space where people can walk and have leisure time, but what else can it do for the city?
When I think about the Joe Louis Greenway, so now we are saying that it's 29.7 miles because it's like growing. So we continue to build the Greenway and design the Greenway as this project unfolds. So 29.7. But when I think about one of the biggest contributions and one of the biggest impacts that I hope to see it continue to have is really this idea that our neighborhoods deserve beautifully designed public space and parks. You heard Jason, who's a good friend, talk about, the downtowns and all of those things. And we deserve both. We deserve a beautiful downtown with an award-winning riverfront, but we also deserve neighborhoods with parks and green space that are multi-use, multifunctional. And then when I think about the Greenway, think about it as a massive transportation project, right? So how do we, as the motor city, as the city that got the world on wheels, how do we get people around non-motorized? And how do we build a safer way for children, for families to recreate and to get around? And so from the moment the Greenway was built, we started seeing people like walking on it, like Detroiters didn't wait. They were like, this is a path and I can get safely well lit from the corner store or from the bus route to my house.
Yes, that is one of the biggest things that I think we hear a lot of residents in the city just talk about the walkability of our city and how to get around and connect to some of our neighborhoods. So how do you think the Greenway will change the culture of biking and walking around the city of Detroit, especially when we just have more designated spaces to do it?
Yeah, I think that's the answer. You said it there. But the other piece is that it's right in your neighborhood. And so we have sidewalks, we have streets, we have bike lanes. But when I think about this first phase of the Joe Louis Greenway, that is creating a dedicated pedestrian and biker path and recreational path. So from the Warren Trailhead, which is on West Warren. So think West Warren, west of Livernois, bordering Dearborn. We have this beautiful 4-acre park that is, people always say, where does it start? Let's just say today that's where it starts, right? At the Warren Trailhead. And now you have a 2-lane dedicated path that you can go out on today, right now, cold or warm or hot, snow or rain, and access this path that is free of motorized vehicles. So there are no cars. So from Warren right now to Chicago, you can go out today and walk and access the Joe Louis Greenway. And so that's something that is physical and there. And I think it's important that we start to see projects like this, massive projects that are actually happening.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I just agreed. I just think about so many different things that are happening in the city, and this is one of the things that I know the residents will really enjoy, especially in the neighborhoods. You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're speaking with Liana Medley, the executive director of the Joe Louis Greenway Partnership. We're discussing the Joe Louis Greenway and what it can do to reduce pedestrian and cyclist deaths. We also want to hear from you. Are you afraid of getting in an accident when walking or biking around Detroit or Metro Detroit? What are you doing to navigate the streets safely? You can give us a call, 313-577-1019. Liana, you talk a lot about the Greenway being an investment in neighborhoods, and we know how important it is for a community to have strong neighborhoods with a lot of amenities. So can you talk about the direct benefits that neighborhoods will see when they're connected to the Greenway?
Yeah, so, that's such a great question, Robin, and thank you for that. So it's not even just the neighborhoods. It's like this is one of the largest projects that we see happening across the country that's connecting neighborhoods. So let's talk about the 4 cities, right? So now this Greenway is connecting Detroit, Dearborn, Highland Park, and Hamtramck. So if you can visually think right now, if you were driving up Woodward, going north or coming south, if you think where the Highland Park High School site was, the Model T, right there is a bridge, and that was an old rail line. That is now designed and developed for public active Greenway. So you will be able to go up there and cross Woodward and look up Woodward and down Woodward as far as your eye can see. I envision us having a telescope so people can come out there like a little observatory, stand on that bridge, and you'll be able to see up and down Woodward. Those are the experiences that I think that we need, the memories that we need to start creating in our public spaces. Then when I think about, then if I go all the way back, right? So the Greenway started with community. It started with engaging with residents and talking about this, taking a group of residents down to Atlanta to see a similar project, because many of them were like, well, what is a Greenway? We don't know what that is. And so how can you tell me that this is good for me? And the city was like, well, we don't want to tell you. We want you to see for yourself. And those residents came back and they began to lead that engagement. Then we talk about construction. Let's talk about the 600,000 tons of debris removed from neighborhoods, right in the neighborhoods. Let's talk about over 30,000 dump tires that have been removed and recycled from the Greenway construction and right in the neighborhoods. So immediate environmental impact, the remediation on the soil, the addition of natural and native plantings right there in the neighborhood. So residents get to come out right out in their backyard and they get to see beautiful green space. When we talk about the health impact of green space, now we have taken contamination and we've removed it and we've capped the soil and we've brought it back to a sustainable condition in the neighborhood. And then you plant flowers, right? What about just the breathing? Think about the asthma rates in our neighborhood. And so adding more trees and more green space. And so, as we see this project, it's only going to enhance the health impact of our residents. And then there's this larger, so the city of Detroit really learned from Atlanta and wanted to take lessons. And so what they did, in addition to the community engagement about the design and what does this mean and how do we heal spatial trauma through public space, right? So now we get to the economic development. So there was a 18 months, 2-year community engagement that the City of Detroit planning team went on. They brought in another group of community leaders, residents, trained them to engage with residents about what do we see the economic benefit of this project being. And there's a young lady on Instagram that I follow, Lady Contractor, and she posted, we know her, right?
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. So she was posting about the Greenway last year, and I reached out to her. I was like, what's up? Let's get out on the Greenway. Come ride around with me, and let's see it. And she posted a video not long ago, and she said, listen, Detroit is giving us a 10-year advance notice on this. People in Atlanta say all the time that they felt like the Beltline they came and it was there, and people were displaced. But the city of Detroit, Dearborn, Highland Park, Hamtramck are being really intentional about how do we go out and think about 10 years, 20 years down the line, what we want these neighborhoods to look like. And I can tell you one of the most important organizing things around it is we want it to look like that the residents who were here had the option to stay and they chose to stay.
Leanna, thank you for helping us to visualize all of this and the many, many benefits that are going to come from the Greenway. In our last 30 seconds, though, not every part of the Greenway has been funded yet. It's supposed to be constructed in 5 to 10 years. When do you think the project will be fully completed?
So we know that the 9 miles of Conrail, which is from Warren all the way around to Joseph Campo and 6 Mile, that segment will be done 27, right? That's ARPA funded. That's a lot of federal funding in that. And then we continue to pursue funding for the rest of it. So, call in and donate, right? Go to our website, jlgpartnership.org. We're looking for some more money to fund this project.
Leanna Medley is the executive director of the Joe Louis Greenway Partnership. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up on the Metro, we've been discussing the dangers of walking or biking around Detroit, and next we'll discuss how we can change our infrastructure to make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists. Stay with us on the Metro. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We've been discussing how dangerous it is to walk and bike around much of the city of Detroit. And we've also been talking with people who are trying to change that. Todd Scott is one of those people. He's the executive director of the Detroit Greenways Coalition, and he's been trying to make the city of Detroit safer to navigate for people who don't have access to a car or simply don't want to have one. Todd, welcome to the Metro.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Of course. So Why are Detroit's streets sometimes unsafe for pedestrians and cyclists, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's primarily for pedestrians because we have these really wide streets and they encourage cars to travel at high speeds. And pedestrians trying to cross those streets have a difficult time because the crosswalks are so long. And one reason we had in the past, which has been remedied quite a bit, is our streetlights weren't working very well, and so cars couldn't see pedestrians. And that's gotten better, but we still have a long ways to go.
We really do. That's why I joke about the knees to chest. I mean, because some of these intersections are so long, you literally have to run to get across to make it in time, or you're going to be stuck in the middle. It's ridiculous. But I do want to go back to the phones. We have Jane in Huntington Woods. Jane, thanks for calling the Metro. What has been your experience biking and walking in Metro Detroit?
Well, I really appreciate the gentleman that's speaking right now because that's what my call is about. I frequently go drive into Detroit from Huntington Woods, and I'm a couple times a week, and for all the things that are really good happening. And I drive down Woodward Avenue, and there's no lights there for pedestrians. So when I'm driving, I'm a very careful driver anyway, but I don't think it's safe for pedestrians crossing Woodward Avenue because, as you said, Tia, the streets are so long without lights. And I just would think it would be wise to have the infrastructure changed so that there would be some traffic lights for the pedestrians. And
all right, so thank you so much, Jane in Huntington Woods, for that. Todd, what do you think about traffic lights for pedestrians?
Yeah, that's a good point because there's not a long time. There's a long break between crossing points for pedestrians. So MDOT is looking at a Woodward corridor study that is going to have its first public meeting later this month, and they're going to look at all these issues and see where they can make improvements for pedestrians getting across the street and improving the lights, street lights as well as traffic lights. That's
actually really interesting. We're like road fiends over here. We love to talk about the roads, so that's really interesting. You're listening to the Metro on WDET Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're speaking with Todd Scott, Executive Director of the Detroit Greenways Coalition. We're discussing the things city officials can do to make Detroit's streets safer for pedestrians and cyclists. Now, Todd, you've been working since 2010 to pass the Complete Streets Ordinance. What's that ordinance, as briefly as you can, and why has it been so hard to get it passed?
Well, so a complete street is a street that's been designed for all users, not just people in cars, and it's for traveling along the corridor and also trying to get across the corridor. And the city of Detroit's been doing a much better job building complete streets. We just want to codify this in ordinance so that it continues on past this current administration and becomes something that the city does all the time. Whenever they rebuild roads, they think about all the users.
And to go back to Woodward, because there is the MDOT workshop next week, I believe it's February 18th. And what exactly is going to be discussed there in terms of improving Woodward and making it this thoroughfare that is welcoming to all?
Yeah, so I'm sure they're going to be talking about pedestrian crossings being a major part of it, but also biking along the corridor. There's sections of Woodward that are way overbuilt for the amount of cars that are on it. And, especially when you get up north of McNichols, where you have 10 lanes of traffic. And in Ferndale, you have 6, and they're operating fine. So, and there's far fewer cars on the Detroit section. So what can we do to improve the biking and walking experience there? I think that'll be a big thing on the agenda.
And over the last 20 years, the city of Detroit has done some things to try and improve biking and walking experiences for people. What do you think is the best thing the city has done thus far?
Well, I think the most important thing is to get cars to not speed and slow cars down because they're more likely to see bikes and pedestrians. And in the awful situation where they might hit them, it's not going to be as damaging to the person. But I think Livernois is a great example of when you make a major investment, you can get cars to go the speed limit without law enforcement. You can have wide sidewalks with cafes, and you can have nice bike lanes at sidewalk level where people feel real comfortable riding.
In our last 30 seconds, the city received $62.5 million in grant money from the federal government to create safer streets. As we've been talking about the necessity of having these safer streets, do you worry that money will be taken away from the federal government now that President Trump is in office?
I think everyone's worried because you said received, and I don't think all that money's been received yet. It's been awarded. So that's the distinction. So as long as the city has the contracts, hopefully the money will come through.
Todd Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. He's the executive director of the Detroit Greenways Coalition.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.